Before we get started with this video, all of the images in this video is from Google, and the story is also from a website from a creator who created this. We're going to link them all in the description down below. Thank you, and enjoy.
Yeah.
What's up, my creepy guys, creepy girls? This is Slender Blitz, and I'm bringing to you a new segment of Slender Blitz's channel. I'll be reading you guys stories of creepypastas and any other story you guys want me to read. But this is the number one thing I always wanted to read to people, because Ticci Toby has always been my favorite. But to get down to the business, I'm going to tell you guys a story of Ticci Toby. Toby, obviously, is one of Slender's proxies. And I'll be posting this video for you guys. I hope you guys like it. Please leave a comment down below. So, let's get right into this, shall we? Ticci Toby. The long road home seemed to go on and on. The road continued outstretched in front of the vehicle endlessly. The light that shone through the branches of the tall green trees danced across the windows in random patterns, every once in a while, occasionally obnoxiously shining in your eyes. The surrounding was full of deep green trees, forming a forest around the road. The only sound was the sound of a car engine as it traveled down the path. It was peaceful, let off a serene feeling, although the ride seemed like a nice one. It lacked every form of nice for both passengers. The middle-aged woman behind the steering wheel, and I had neat short brown hair that fit her complex quite well. She wore a green V-neck t-shirt, a pair of blue jeans, diamond-studded earrings decorated each other of her ears, which partly showed from behind her haircut. She had deep green eyes, which was brought out by her shirt, and the lighting seemed to make them more noticeable. There wasn't much significance to her appearance. She just looked like an average mother that you see on TV shows and such. But one thing for sure made her different from those average mothers, and that was the dark bags under her eyes. Her facial expression was gloom and sad, although she genuinely looked like one who smiled a lot. She would sniffle every once in a while and occasionally glance back in the rearview mirror to look back at her son in the back seat, who was hunched over, partly his arms held tight around his chest, and his head pressed against the cold window. The boy lacked any normal appearance. Anyone could blandly see that something was wrong with him. His messy brown hair went everywhere which way, and his pale, almost gray skin was brought out by luminous lighting. His eyes were dark, unlike his mother, and he wore a white t-shirt and scrub pants that had been provided to him by the hospital. The clothes he had worn before were so shredded and blood-stained that they weren't wearable anymore. The right side of his face barred a few cuts, along with his split eyebrow. His right arm was bandaged up all the way to his shoulders, which had been shredded when his right side had hit the shattered glass. His injuries appeared to be painful when really he couldn't feel a thing. He never could feel a thing. That was just one of the glories about being him. One of many challenges he had to face growing up. He was growing up with a rare disease that caused him to completely numb towards pain. Never before he felt himself get hurt. He could have lost an arm and felt nothing. That and another major disorder he had faced was one that gained him many insulting nicknames. In the short time he attended grade school, before he was moved to home schooling, was his Tourette's syndrome, which caused him to tick, twitch in ways he couldn't control. He would crack his neck uncontrollably and twitch every once in a while. Kids who teased him and called him Ticci Toby mocked him with exaggerating, twitching, and laughing. It got so bad he turned to homeschooling. It was too hard for him to be in common learning environment, with seemingly every kid poking or more like stabbing fun of him. Toby stared blankly out the window. His face was empty of an despicable emotion. And every few minutes his shoulders, arms, or foot would twitch. Every bump that the car hits made him stomach turn. Toby Rogers was the boy's name, and the last time Toby remembered riding a car was when it crashed. That's all he thought about, occasionally replying everything he had remembered before he blacked out, over and over again. Toby had been the lucky one, when his sister hadn't been so lucky. When the thought of his older sister came, he couldn't help but let his eyes begin to tear up. The horrible memories replayed in his mind. Her screaming that had been cut off when the front of the car was smashed in. It all went black. For the moment before Toby opened his eyes to see his sister's body, her forehead pierced with glass shards. Her hips and legs were crushed under the force of the steering wheel. Her torso pushed in from the late inflated airbag. This was the last thing he had seen of his dear older sister. The road home continued on for what seemed like forever. It took so long to get home due to his mother's waiting to avoid passing the site of the crash, when the surrounding gave into a familiar neighborhood. They had both been more than ready to get out of the car, step back into their own home. It was an older neighborhood with quaint little houses, all next to each other. The car drove in front of the little blue house with white window panes. They both quickly noticed the old vehicle that was parked in front of the house and the familiar figure who stood out in the driveway. Toby felt an automatic anger and frustration took over him at the sight of his father. His father, who wasn't there. His mother pulled the car up into the driveway beside him before turning off the engine, preparing to step out and face her husband. "Why is he here?" Toby said quietly as he looked back at his mother, who reached the open door. "He's your father. He's here because he wants to see you." His mother responded in a monotone voice, trying to sound less shaky. Yet he couldn't have driven up to the hospital to see Lyra before she died. Toby narrowed his eyes out the window. "He was drunk that night, honey. He couldn't drive." "Yeah, when is he not?" Toby pushed the door, opened the door before his mother stumbled out onto the driveway where he met his father's gaze before looking down at his feet in stern. His mother stepped out behind him, met her husband's eyes before walking around the car. His father opened his arms, expecting a hug from his wife, but she walked past him and put her arms around Toby's shoulders and influenced him to begin walking inside. "Connie," her husband began to say under a raspy voice, "What? No welcome home hug, huh?" She ignored her husband's obnoxious words and walked past him with her son under her arm. "Hey, he's 16. He can walk by himself." His father began to follow them in. "He's 17. Connie glared back at him before opening the door to the house and stepped inside. "Toby, why don't we get you into your room to rest, okay? I'll come get you when dinner is ready." "No, I'm 16. I can walk by myself," Toby said sarcastically, glared back at his father before stumbling up the small stairs, causing and turning into his room, where he slammed the door violently. His little room didn't have much in it, just a small bed, a dresser, a window in his wall, had a few framed pictures of his family back when they were a family before his father became an alcoholic and acted violently towards the rest of his family. Toby remembered when he was arguing with his mother and he grabbed her by the hair and shoved her to the floor. When Lyra had tried to break it up, he pushed her and she hit her back on the corner of the kitchen counter. Toby could never forgive him or what he did to his mother and sister. Never. Toby didn't care how much his father beat him down. He couldn't feel it anyways. What he did care about was how he intentionally hurt the only two people he cared about. And when he Waiting in the hospital, where his sister took her last few breaths, the only person who didn't rush there was his dad. Toby stood by the window and looked out onto the streets. He could have sworn he saw things out of the corner of his eyes, but quickly blamed it on the medication he had been put on. When dinner time had come around, his mother called up to him, "Toby, come down the stairs." Come down the stairs, and hesitantly sat down at the table across from his father, and in between his mother and an empty chair. It was quiet as his parents picked at the food, but Toby refused to eat. Instead, he just watched his dad with a blank stare. His mother caught on to his stare towards his father and elbowed him slightly. Toby looked over at her slightly and looked down at his uneaten food, which he didn't touch. Toby laid in bed. He pulled his covers over his head and stared at the window. He was tired, but there was no way he would fall asleep. He couldn't. There was too much thinking about it. He had been debating on whether or not to follow his mother's directions and forgive his father, or continue holding a grudge with his boiling hatred. He heard his door crack open. His mother paddled into the room and sat on the bed next to him. She reached over and rubbed his back, which had been turned to her. "I know it's hard, Toby. Trust me, I understand. But I promise you, it will get better," she said softly. "When is it going to leave?" "When is he going to leave?" Toby said with an innocent tone in his shaky voice. Connie let her gaze fall down to her feet. "I don't know, honey. He's staying as far as I know," she replied. Toby didn't respond. He just continued to look forward at the wall, holding his damaged arm near his chest. After a few minutes of silence, his mother sighed before she leaned in to kiss his cheek and stood up to walk out of the room. "Good night," she said. As she closed the door, the hours passed slowly, and Toby couldn't quit tossing and turning every time he let his imaginations take over him. He heard the screeching of tires, the screaming of his sister, and he could uncontrollably jerk in bed. He threw off his covers. Lying on his back, he pulled his pillow over his face and cried into it. He could feel his chest rising and fall as he let out each shaky breath as he cried. He could hear his own pitiful weeping. He would have been screaming and crying if he didn't press his pillow over his face. After a few seconds, he threw the pillow off his face as well. He sat up, hunched over, holding his head, breathing roughly, tears streaming from his eyes. He couldn't help but cry. He tried to keep it in, but he couldn't help but whines and whimpers. As he sat there, shaking, he inhaled before he stood up and walked around his bed to the window. He peered out, taking a deep breath, trying to calm down. He rubbed his eyes and looked out of the group of tall pine trees across the street. He stopped. Suddenly, his gaze slowly centered on something standing under the streetlight. He heard ringing in his ears. He couldn't look away. The figure stood between the streetlight, about 2 feet shorter than it, long arms draped as it stared up at him. With no non-existing eyes, the figure had no features whatsoever. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Yet it held Toby's hypnotized stares, seemingly peering into his very being. The ringing in his ears grew louder and louder each second he stared before suddenly it all went black. Next morning, Toby woke up in his bed. He felt different. He wasn't tired at all. When he consciously woke up, he felt like he had been lying there awake for hours. He had no thought flowing through his mind. He sat up slowly, stumbled over to the wall, but when he stood up, he automatically felt dizzy. He stumbled to the doorway and walked downstairs. His parents were sitting at the table. His father was in tune with the small TV and sat on the countertop. His mother reading the newspaper. She quickly looked over and she felt Toby's presence looming before her. "Well, good morning, sleepyhead. You've been sleeping 4 hours forever." She greeted him with a hesitant smile. She slowly looked over at the clock and noticed that it was 12:30 p.m. "I made you breakfast, but it got cold. I was going to wake you, but I felt you needed sleep." Her expressions fell from happy to worried as her son re- resisted responding to her. "Are you alright?" Toby stumbled over and sat by his father. He felt as if he was on idle and had no control over his action. He was seeing everything he did, but it didn't seem to register to in his brain properly. He reached out to his father's arm, but his hand ended up being slapped. His father turned to him abruptly, pushed his chair over with his fist. "Don't touch me, boy," he yelled. His mother said, "Alright, knock that off. That is the last thing we need." The days went by. Things continued on their way as they were. Connie spent most of the time cleaning up the house. Her rude husband spent most of the time ordering her around. It was just how it used to be before the crash. Toby never really left his room. He would sit by his bed, trembling. His mind would wander, but his thoughts changed paths. To be remembered, he would pace around his small room like a caged animal, or stared out the window. The unhealthy cycle continued. Connie continued to be pushed around by her husband, being way too submissive to him. Toby remained in his room. Before he could think twice, he would begin to chew on his hands, tearing the flesh from his fingers. He would gnaw his hands until they bled. When his mother walked in on him while he was doing so, she reacted horribly. She rushed him downstairs, grabbed the first aid, wrapping his hands in it. She demanded that he wouldn't leave her side from then. He isolated himself so much that he grew to hate being around others. His memory grew glitchy as well. He started missing memories of minutes, hours, and days, so on. He would begin talking nonsense about things completely unrelated to conversations he would have. He'd go off about seeing things, sharks in his sink as he washed the dishes, hearing crickets in his pillow, and seeing ghosts outside his bedroom window. All the nonsense landed him in the counselor's office. His mother grew too obnoxious about his mental health. She decided it would be good for him to talk to a professional about what he was feeling. Connie walked Toby into the building, holding his hand and guiding him in. She walked him up to the front desk, began to talk to the lady who sat behind him. "Mr. Rogers?" the lady asked. "Yes, that's me," Connie nodded. "Mrs. Rogers?" "Yes, that's me," Connie nodded. We're here to see Dr. Oliver. I'm here with Toby Rogers." "Yes, right this way." The lady stood up and led them down a long hallway. Toby looked at the frame artwork down the hall and tuned into the sound of the lady's high heels on the hard wooden floor. She opened the door to the room with a table and 2 chairs. "If we can get him to sit in here for a few minutes, I'll get the doctor." She smiled and held the door open. Toby stumbled into the room and sat down at the table. He looked over at his mother and the lady before the door slowly shut behind him. He looked around the room before he held his tight bandaged hand and began to bite at the bandage to unwrap his hand, but was interrupted as the door swung open and the young woman in the black and white spotted dress and light blonde hair stepped in, holding a clipboard and pen. "Toby?" she asked with a smile. Toby looked up at her and nodded. "Nice to meet you, Toby. My name is Dr. Oliver." She put her hand out for him to shake, but hesitantly pulled away when she noticed his bandaged hand. "Oh," she smiled nervously before clearing her throat, sitting in the chair across the table from him. "So I'm going to ask you a few questions. Try to answer them honestly as possible, okay?" She placed her clipboard down on the table. Toby nodded slowly and held his restrained hand in his lap. "How old are you, Toby?" 17, he responded quietly. She wrote that down on the paper that would clip to the clipboard. "What is your full name?" "Toby Aaron Rogers." "What is your birthday?" "April 28th. "Who is your immediate family?" Toby paused for a minute before answering. "My mom, my dad," and he stopped by my sister. "I heard about your sister, dear. I'm really sorry." Her expression faded into a sad, pitiful look. Toby nodded. Do you remember anything from the crash, Toby? He looked away from her. His mind went black for a moment. He looked down at his lap and the surrounding. He heard a faint ringing sound. His eyes widened and he froze in place. Toby? Toby, are you listening? Toby felt a shiver go down his spine until he froze once again and slowly looked over at the little window, the door, where he saw a dark featureless figure peering at him. He stared, eye wide, and the ringing grew louder and louder until suddenly the loud of the voice, Counselor, it broke his trance. Toby, she yelled. Toby jumped and fell sideways on the chair, back up into the corner. Dr. Oliver stood up, holding her clipboard to her chest, a surprising look in her eyes. Toby met her eyes, his breath hitching as he twitched. The night Toby laid in bed, his eyes dazed as he stared straight up at his ceiling. He could feel himself beginning to doze off when he heard the scatter of footsteps down his hall. He sat up, looking towards the door, his door wide open. There was no light. Eventually it was lit by the luminous blue glow of the moon through his window, leaving a cold lighting. He stood up, slowly made his way towards the doorway, when suddenly the door, which was previously wide open, slammed in his face. He gasped and fell back. His was out of breath. When he hit the ground and began to breathe heavily, his eyes widened open. He waited for a few seconds before getting back up on his feet. He reached out and grasped the cold door handle with his bandaged hand and cracked it open. He looked out the dark hallway and tiptoed out of his room. The window at the end of the hallway lit up. The darkness was blue moonlight. As he paddled his way down, he could hear footsteps. You could hear footsteps. Fuck. He could hear footsteps rustling around him, faint giggling led by the pitter-patter of small feet. It sounded like a child had run in front of him, giggling and running around. The hallway was a lot longer than he had remembered. It seemed endless, like the ride home from the hospital. He heard the door crack in front of him. "Mom?" he called out in a shaky voice. Suddenly a door slammed behind him, and he jumped and turned around. Behind him, he had heard a long, eerie groan from behind him that sounded to croak right in his ears. He turned around as fast as he could, was suddenly face to face with none other than his dead sister. Her eyes were clouded white, her skin pale, the right side of her jaw only dangling, only on by Ticci's muscles, glass protruding from her forehead, black blood leaking down her face, her blonde hair pulled up back in a ponytail, as it always was, wearing her gray t-shirt and athlete shorts, which was dirty and spotted with blood. Her legs were bent in a way they shouldn't be. She stood emitting a long croaking noise, only an inch away from Toby's face. Toby yelped, fell back. He started to crawl backwards away from her, not able to break the eye contact he held with her blank, dead eyes. He dragged himself backwards until he backed up into something. He stopped for a second. Everything was dead silent, except for his heavy breathing, crying. He slowly looked up to the blank face of a tall, dark figure that stood over him. Behind the tall, dark mask were rows of children, looking to range from 3 to 10 years, their eyes completely black and dark blood leaking from their eye socket. He screamed and stood up as fast as he could, only to be tripped by dark black tendrils that wrapped around his ankle. He fell straight on his stomach and got the wind knocked out of his chest. He tried screaming out, but he couldn't make a sound. He wheezed out before it all went black. Toby woke up with a start. He screamed out as he sat up as fast as he could, completely short of breath. He wheezed out and held his chest. It was just a dream. Just a dream. He laid back down on his bed. Rolled over on his side. It felt like a giant weight had been lifted off his chest. As he took in a deep breath, he stood up and paddled over to his window. He saw nothing. Nobody was out there. No ghost, no figure, no nothing. He heard the rustling cough of his father at the doorway. His door was closed. He walked over and opened it, looking out into the hallway once again. He padded down the hallway into the kitchen, where he found his dad standing and having a smoke in their living room. Toby waited a second and watched him from around the corner before a burning feeling started deep in his chest. Deep pulling anger took over him. He heard a little imaginary voice in his head. "Do it, do it, do it," they chanted. He turned away, held his arm. He felt like he actually had control over himself, unlike he did for the past few weeks. Since he got home from the hospital, he actually had complete thought for just a moment before they were clouded by the chanting of the little voices in his head. Kill him. He wasn't there. He wasn't there. Kill him. Kill him. They continue on. Toby trembled. No, no. He wasn't going to do it. What, was he going crazy? No. He won't kill anyone. He can't. He hates his father. Again. He hates his father, but no way he wasn't going to kill him. That was it. That's the last thought he had before he fell into an idle state once again. The influence of a voice in his head was too much. He began slyly walking up behind his father, reached over the counter to a knife holder in the kitchen, pulled out a large knife that had been resting in the case. He gripped it in his hand, felt a sensation take over his chest. He let out a snicker. He began laughing so hard he had to gasp for breath. His father turned around brutally before he felt a brute force shoved him to the floor. He grunted as the hair was knocked out of him. What? He looked up at the boy who stood over him, grasping the kitchen knife in his hand. "Toby, what are you doing?" He went to sit up and put arms out in front of him in self-defense, but before he knew it, Toby was on top of him. He wanted to grab at his neck, but his father reached out and blocked his hand by grabbing onto his wrist. "Stop, get off me, you little fucker," he yelled with his other hand. He threw an off-center punch towards Toby's shoulder, but he didn't stop. The look in Toby's eyes were not the same. It looked as if a demon had taken control over him. He yelled back and went to stab the knife into his father's chest. But he blocked him and grabbed onto his wrist once again. He went to shove him back, but Toby kicked out his feet in front of him and landed a hard blow straight to his face. His father recoiled and pulled his arms away to cuff his face, but Toby got back up and drove the knife straight into his shoulders. His father let out a loud cry, went to pull out the knife, but before he could, Toby threw his fist straight into his face. He intended to pound his fist into his head. Laughing and wheezing, he cracked his neck, grabbed the knife, and ripped it out of his shoulders. He drove it deep into his father's chest repeatedly, stabbing into his torso. Blood spilling out and getting splattered everywhere. He didn't stop until his father's body went still. He threw the knife over to the side and over his body, coughing and panting. He stared at his smashed-in face and sat there twitching until a loud scream broke the silence. He looked over to see his mother standing a few feet away, covering her mouth, tears streaming down her eyes. "Toby," she screamed, "why did you do that? Why?" She screamed. Toby stood up and began to back away from his father's bloody corpse. He began to back out of the kitchen. He looked down at the blood-soaked bandage on his hand and looked up at his mother one last time before he turned and ran out the house. He ran into the garage, slammed his hand against the control panel on the wall, and pushed the button to open the garage. Before he runs out, his Before he runs out, his father's two hatchets that had been hanging onto the tool rack filled a table full of jar filled to the brim with old rusted nails and screws. One hatchet was new. It had a bright orange handle. One hatchet was new. It had a bright orange handle and a shiny blade. The other was old with a wooden handle and old dull blade. He grabbed both and looked down at the table. His eyes met a box of matches under the table with a red gasoline tank. He held both of the hatchets in one hand, grabbed the match and gasoline before running out down the driveway up to the street. As he approached the street light that he could see his own bedroom window, he heard the police sirens in the distance. He turned around and red and blue flashing lights came rushing down the street. Toby stood for a second before he pulled off the cap of gasoline and ran down the street, spilling gasoline all over the streets after him. And he turned to run into the trees. He poured the last bit of gasoline out before he reached into his pocket, pulled out a match. He struck it against the box and nearly dropped it. In an instant, flame burst out around him. The fire caught onto the tree and bushes around him. Before he knew it, he was surrounded by fire. The silhouettes of police cars were visible through the flames. As he backed away into the forest around him, he looked around, but his visions were blurred. His heart was pounding. He closed his eyes for a moment. This was it. This was the end. Toby felt a hand over his shoulders. He opened his eyes and looked over to see a large white hand with long bony fingers that rest on his shoulders. He followed the arm that was attached to the hand up to a tall, dark figure. It appeared to be wearing a dark black suit, and its face was completely blank. It towered over Toby's small frame, and it looked down on him. Tendrils reached out from its back. Before Toby knew it, his vision blurred. He was surrounded by the sound of ringing in his ears. Everything went black. That was it. That was the end. That was how Toby Rogers died. A few weeks later, Connie sat in her sister's kitchen. Her sister, Lori, sat next to her drinking a cup of coffee. About 3 weeks ago, Connie lost her husband, her son, and a few weeks before, she lost her daughter to a car crash. Since then, she moved in with her sister. The police were keeping her busy. They had just finished cleaning up the case. The story had been released 2 weeks ago, and focus would seem to have shifted to a complete news story. Lori switched on the TV to a news broadcast. On the TV, the news report began to introduce the new headline. We have breaking news. Last night, there had been a report murder of 4 individuals. There are no suspects yet, but the victim were a group of middle school kids who had been out in the woods late last night. The kids had been plunged and stabbed to death. The investigators had discovered a weapon at the crime scene, which appeared to be an old dull blade hatchet. As you can see here, picture change to show snapshot. A weapon exactly as it was left on the crime scene. Investigators had pulled the name of the possible suspect, Toby Rogers, a 17-year-old boy who a few weeks had stabbed his father to death and tried to cover up his escape by setting fire in the streets in the forest area around the neighborhood. But though they had believed a young boy had died in the fire, investigators suspect that Rogers may still be alive due to the fact that his body was never found. That's it for the story, guys, of Ticci Toby. I hope you guys like this. I know I might have stutter a lot because that's what I do, but I hope you guys very like this story because I love it. Ticci Toby will always be my favorite character. Always. So, this is going to be the end of the video. Please, leave a comment down below if you want me to do more stories of creepypastas. Any other creepypastas or anything. Just leave down in the comments below. And don't topple around that subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button with Sonic Rainbow. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace!